I still remember the way it felt, sitting at the edge of the dining room while everyone else laughed and passed plates around. My presence barely acknowledged. Birthdays, holidays, even my daughter's school recitals, there was always a chair I wasn't meant to sit in, a moment I wasn't meant to witness. My voice, my opinions, my accomplishments, they were invisible, tucked away behind polite nods and hurried excuses. Over the years, I learned to stay quiet, to let the world pass while I quietly calculated my own path, the one they would never see coming. The phone rang, sharp against the quiet hum of my apartment. Millie's name flashed across the screen, and my chest tightened. I hesitated, but curiosity won over, and I answered. Her voice was bright, careless, unaware of the years she had erased from our shared history. She spoke of her new plans, her little victories, her excitement over a house I had long ago been told I had no right to influence. I felt the familiar sting, the old ache of being invisible to the family I had once poured everything into. But as the conversation went on, another feeling began to rise, one I had cultivated over decades of patience, work, and quiet determination. I realized that those years of exclusion had not broken me. They had prepared me. Every late night spent planning, every dollar saved, every skill honed in secret was a step toward a life that no one could dictate. Millie's oblivious boasting only fueled my resolve. I ended the call with a small, private smile. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of anticipation rather than hurt. I knew what I needed to do next, and I was ready to see it through. The Oregon coast stretched before me, the waves folding into themselves, endless and insistent. I walked along the sand, letting the cold spray sting my cheeks, imagining a place of my own, an actual property where I could welcome people, create warmth, and finally have the recognition I'd earned over decades. The thought had been dormant for years, buried beneath family obligations and the quiet ache of being overlooked. But now it had returned, vivid and undeniable. I had spent a lifetime preparing for this moment, often without realizing it. Every late-night job in hotels, every shift managing small inns in Portland and Cannon Beach, every careful investment and savings plan, it had all led to this. The numbers in my ledger, once a source of mild pride, now looked like keys to a life I could finally claim. I had the skills, the money, and the experience. All that remained was the courage to act. Mara had called earlier that morning, her voice warm and insistent. "You deserve recognition and freedom. Leora," she had said, "you've carried the weight of their indifference long enough. It's time to do this for you." I had laughed softly, a mixture of nerves and excitement. Mara's encouragement reminded me that the life I imagined wasn't some impossible fantasy, it was achievable. By afternoon, I was making inquiries about a modest beachfront resort not far from Newport. The property had been on the market for a while, overlooked by others who didn't see its potential. I felt a rush of urgency. At my age, I couldn't wait another decade to begin the life I had always deserved. Each conversation with brokers and local managers brought me closer to a tangible reality. I ended the day standing at the water's edge, letting the tide roll around my boots. I could feel the path opening, but also the weight of doubt creeping in. Could I truly take this leap? After all these years of waiting, I first saw the resort from the edge of the bluff, the ocean stretching endlessly behind it. The paint was peeling, the boardwalk sagging in places, and the windows streaked with salt and neglect. Yet, despite the decay, I saw potential, a space that could be transformed into something welcoming, warm, and undeniably mine. The location was perfect. tucked between a quiet cove and the main stretch of beach where tourists lingered in summer. My heart leapt, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The real estate agent, a man with graying hair and skeptical eyes, walked alongside me, clipboard in hand. "Most people at your age are thinking about retiring, not buying a resort," he said, shaking his head. "It's a lot of work. And frankly, the renovation costs alone." His words trailed off, but the implication was clear. I was overreaching. I felt a familiar twinge of irritation, the same frustration that had followed me through decades of family indifference. Their doubts only fueled me. I made an offer that afternoon, carefully calculated but ambitious. A week later, it was rejected, not because it was insufficient, but because my paperwork hadn't been processed quickly enough. I felt a pang of disappointment, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. I contacted the broker, resubmitted everything, and insisted on personal follow-ups. I refused to let slow procedures or skepticism block the opportunity I had been envisioning for years. That evening, I sat in my small Portland apartment, the waves of memory mingling with the ocean outside my window. The years of being excluded family gatherings where I was forgotten. Achievements that went unnoticed pressed against me, yet instead of despair, they gave me clarity. I was done waiting for acknowledgement that would never come. I was done shrinking into the background. I made a quiet vow I would see this resort open under my name, no matter how long it took, no matter who doubted me. Every rejection, every raised eyebrow, every whispered, "She can't do it," only strengthened my determination. I closed my ledger and stared at the faint lines of the Oregon coast in the distance. I would prove them wrong, but first, I had to take the next step. The morning light fell across the roof beams as I met Tom, the contractor I had chosen after interviewing half a dozen. He was pragmatic, occasionally gruff, but thorough. "We'll start with the roof," he said, pointing to the sagging shingles that had weathered one too many Oregon storms. I nodded, feeling the first surge of ownership ripple through me. Over the next weeks, the resort tested me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Storm warnings forced us to secure scaffolding and pause work, while permit delays slowed progress more than any physical labor ever could. Small disagreements with contractors flared who should paint first, which fixtures were up to code, but I refused to let frustration dictate my pace. Mara, ever the quiet strategist, provided guidance from afar, nudging me toward solutions without undermining my authority. "Remember," she said one evening over a call, "you've earned the right to decide. Trust it." I spent long hours walking the hallways, checking measurements, reviewing invoices, and occasionally climbing into dusty corners to inspect workmanship. Each nail hammered and coat of paint applied became a silent declaration. I was not the woman who faded into the background. I had waited, watched, and learned. Now it was my turn to act. One evening, after the last tile was set in the new lobby, I sank into a folding chair, the ocean wind drifting through open windows. The resort wasn't finished, but it was alive, my vision taking shape in real time. The years of patience, resilience, and quiet determination had built more than a structure. They had fortified me for what lay ahead. I made a mental list of the next steps: furnishings, staff, marketing, and realized the true test was approaching: welcoming guests for the first time under my name. I spent the morning finalizing the resort's online presence, carefully curating photos and descriptions that captured both the charm of the oceanfront and the warmth I wanted every guest to feel. Each post, each reply to inquiries, felt like a brick laid in a foundation I had been building my entire life. Reservations began trickling in, some from loyal friends of my previous hospitality ventures, others from strangers drawn to the promise of a quiet getaway. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but notice Millie's social media posts. She flaunted her latest vacations, her newest designer purchases, and the ease of a life built on privilege. I swallowed the sting, letting it motivate me rather than deflate me. She had no idea how close I was to a milestone she had always assumed I would never reach. Then came the unexpected message, an inquiry for a full weekend stay, followed by a confirmation that the guests wanted the entire resort. My heart skipped. This was more than a soft opening. It was a test of everything I had prepared for, a statement in itself. I called Tom and the team, outlining a detailed schedule to ensure the resort could handle the unexpected full booking. Everyone adjusted seamlessly, and for the first time, I felt the thrill of total ownership. As I locked the office that evening, looking out at the lights reflecting on the water, I realized that my achievement wasn't just measured in bookings or profits. It was in proving, to myself more than anyone else, that years of exclusion had not broken me. The resort was alive under my guidance, and its first weekend would be the stage on which my years of patience, planning, and quiet determination would finally be seen. I reviewed the guest list one last time, noting the arrival times and special requests. The first weekend of occupancy would set the tone for everything to come, and the next steps I took would decide whether my presence and my success would remain understated or make a lasting impression. The morning began with dark clouds rolling over the coast, wind whipping the sand into small, stinging swirls. Tom called ahead, worried about the safety of the arriving guests and the newly completed decks. I took a deep breath, scanning the resort from the porch. Years of experience had taught me that storms tested more than structures, they tested resolve. I coordinated with the team, moving furniture indoors, securing loose items, and adjusting the check-in schedule to accommodate delayed arrivals. Every decision was deliberate. There was no panic in my voice, only calm instructions. The storm outside mirrored the tension I had carried for years, a reminder of all the times life had tried to push me aside. Then my phone rang. Millie. Her voice was bright and demanding. She wanted to reserve a room for the weekend, hoping to escape her usual social obligations. I hesitated only a moment before replying, careful to keep my tone polite but firm. I'm so sorry, Millie. The resort is fully booked this weekend. I felt the subtle pause on the line, the unspoken shock at her assumption that she could always find space wherever she wished. After hanging up, I reviewed the logistics one last time. The storm was intensifying, but every detail, guest rooms, meals, staff rotations was under control. I found satisfaction in the balance between caution and authority, knowing that my years had taught me how to anticipate obstacles and turn them into manageable challenges. By afternoon, the first cars began to arrive, headlights cutting through the gray haze. Guests were tired, but smiling, reassured by the smooth handling of a situation they had feared might ruin their getaway. I greeted them personally, offering warmth that contrasted sharply with the storm outside. As the last vehicle pulled up, I realized that the weekend would test more than my planning. It would reveal how decisively I could claim the life I had built. The storm had passed, but the real challenge was only beginning. By mid-morning, the resort was alive with movement. Guests carried bags, laughed at the crashing waves, and marveled at the freshly painted exteriors. I moved among them, offering warm greetings, checking that rooms were ready, and quietly noting small adjustments that might improve their stay. Everything ran like clockwork, a testament to years of planning and preparation. Then Millie arrived. She stepped out of her car with the air of someone accustomed to privilege, expecting her presence to bend the day to her will. She glanced around, frowning at the lack of a reserved parking spot or a personal greeting from me. I approached with a neutral smile, offering standard hospitality. Welcome. Millie. We're fully booked, so I hope you enjoy your weekend with the other guests. Her lips tightened. A flash of disbelief crossing her face. All the rooms. But I'm afraid we had some early bookings. I said evenly. Everything is arranged according to reservations. She tried to push for exceptions. But I held my ground. My calm authority left no room for manipulation. Staff followed my lead, responding to her inquiries with professionalism rather than favoritism. The realization settled over her slowly here. She had no special privileges. As the afternoon unfolded, Millie's frustration became more obvious. She hovered near the common areas, attempting to influence the schedule, but guests and staff moved around her, unaware of her efforts. I watched her, a mix of satisfaction and curiosity rising within me. Years of exclusion had taught me patience and strategy, and now I could exercise both without guilt. By evening, the resort hummed with contentment. Guests laughed over dinner, sharing stories and enjoying the view of the Pacific as the sun dipped low. Millie lingered at the edge, clearly out of her element, observing rather than controlling. I walked along the beach after dinner, reflecting on the first full day of operations and the delicate balance of power now at my fingertips. The challenge had only just begun, and how Millie would respond in the coming days remained to be seen. Breakfast buzzed through the resort's dining hall, a soft clatter of plates and low conversation. I moved between tables, ensuring everything ran smoothly. When I spotted Millie standing near the lobby, her expression sharp, scanning the room as if the entire resort existed for her inspection. I approached, feeling the weight of years spent in quiet exclusion, finally converging into a single moment. "Millie," I called, my voice carrying over the hum of conversation. She turned, eyebrows rising in surprise. I didn't pause. "Just like your house. Mine's out of room." She froze, the words settling on her like a sudden chill. Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again, searching for some reply that could undo the truth she had ignored for so long. Around us, guests glanced up, sensing an unusual tension. I could see recognition flicker in their eyes, the kind reserved for witnessing justice quietly delivered. Millie's hands trembled slightly as she realized the mirror of her own past behavior had been placed before her. Every birthday she had flaunted, every holiday I had been absent from, every moment she had assumed privilege as entitlement, it all reflected back in this simple, unyielding statement. I didn't raise my voice, didn't make a scene. The power was in my calm certainty, in the boundary I had established without malice, without theatrics. She stumbled backward, caught by the polite but firm responses of staff who now treated her like any other guest. Not the daughter she assumed she could manipulate. The guests returned to their meals, some smiling at the subtle drama, others simply observing, but the room had shifted. I felt a quiet rush of empowerment, not revenge, but a reclamation of dignity. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated had culminated in a moment that belonged to me alone. I stepped back, letting the day continue, allowing Millie to adjust to her new reality. I watched her wrestle with the understanding that she was no longer in control, that the patterns of the past had been rewritten on my terms. It was a revelation that would linger for both of us. Long after the breakfast dishes had been cleared, by mid-afternoon, Millie had slipped away, her shoulders tight, eyes avoiding mine as she moved toward the parking lot. The room felt lighter, the usual undercurrent of tension dissipating like mist in the sun. I took a slow breath, letting the quiet settle around me. Years of exclusion, years of being overlooked, had led to this moment not with shouts, not with spectacle, but with calm assertion and clear boundaries. I returned to my office overlooking the ocean, the waves rolling steadily below, a rhythm that reminded me of resilience and patience. I thought about the sense of empowerment that surged through me, not from humiliating Millie, but from standing firm in the truth of my life and choices. Boundaries, I realized, carried more strength than revenge ever could. They protected dignity, preserved autonomy, and demanded respect without bitterness. Sitting at the desk, I pulled a sheet of stationery from the drawer and began a letter to Millie. I wrote carefully, each word chosen to balance firmness with guidance. You are welcome here when you act with respect. I wrote, but entitlement will not grant access to what I've built. Life is measured by responsibility, not by assumptions of privilege. I reminded her that the resort, like life itself, required consideration and effort to be fully appreciated. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in an envelope, leaving it on my desk for her to take when she was ready to confront the lessons of the day. There was no need to rush. The lesson had already begun in the wake of her own reflection. Watching the ocean shimmer under the afternoon sun, I allowed myself a quiet moment of satisfaction. This was the culmination of decades of patience, quiet preparation, and emotional resilience. The resort hummed around me, guests chatting over coffee, staff moving efficiently, the scent of fresh linens mingling with salt air, and I realized that my power was not in forcing recognition, but in creating a space where respect had to be earned. The sense of clarity was invigorating. I had finally reclaimed not just a property, but the authority and freedom that had been denied to me for years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new guests, and perhaps new encounters with Millie. But I felt ready. My rules were set, my boundaries clear, and my place in this world unshakable. The morning sunlight spilled across the resort's terrace, casting a golden glow on the freshly swept decks and flower-lined paths. Guests moved between breakfast tables, their laughter and conversation weaving into the gentle rhythm of the waves. I paused at the railing, letting the salty air fill my lungs. The resort was no longer just a building or a dream. It had become an extension of everything I had worked toward for decades: independence, dignity, and a place where my vision mattered. Millie approached quietly, holding a tray of pastries she'd prepared for the staff. Her movements were tentative, almost apologetic, and I could see the shadow of reflection in her eyes. Small gestures, she refilled coffee cups without being asked, checked in with the housekeepers, smiled politely at returning guests, hinted at a subtle reconciliation. It wasn't yet complete, and it might never be perfect. But it was progress, and that alone felt significant. I returned to my office and opened my journal. The pages filled with years of notes, reflections, and careful plans. I wrote simply, we define our own spaces, our own lives. Respect and effort create what entitlement never could. The past shapes us, but it does not have to control us. Each word carried the weight of experience, the clarity that only decades of trials could provide. Looking out at the horizon, I thought about the life I had built, the resilience it required, the patience it demanded, and the joy it now offered. Age brought perspective and wisdom, not just the aches and memories of what had been denied. I had claimed more than a resort. I had claimed my place, my voice, and my authority. And in doing so, I had created something enduring, something that would outlast fleeting resentment or entitlement. The resort hummed with energy and laughter, a living testament to persistence and careful nurturing. I closed my journal, smiling softly, the weight of past exclusion finally balanced by the serenity of accomplishment. Tomorrow would bring new guests and fresh challenges, but I felt ready, confident that the foundation I had laid was not just mine, but a legacy of resilience, dignity, and empowerment.